It's my pleasure to offer the floor to the Honorable Keisal Peters. She's a Minister of State with responsibility for foreign affairs and foreign trade in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. First, let me take this opportunity to wish all of the wonderful, beautiful women here happy International Women's Day. We are indeed a phenomenal bunch. I wish to follow other delegations in conveying appreciation to the Republic of Costa Rica for hosting this meeting and the superb hospitality and warmth of its people. I also wish to thank Alicia Bacena, Executive Secretary of ECLAC, for extending an invitation to me to participate in this panel to discuss a very important topic. Now, in the context of the topic, natural disasters and the asymmetry of climate change in the Caribbean, my presentation will focus on three categories, the 3 R's as I call them. First, we look at the reality. Secondly, we look at re-evaluation. And thirdly, we look at resilience. The Caribbean has made tremendous strides in pursuing the Sustainable Development Goals and its regional development agenda. And yet, the inherent vulnerabilities of small island developing states, especially to climate change, has too often stalled, reversed, or discounted these gains. This is the reality. These inherent vulnerabilities of primarily coastal dwelling populations and settlements in highly hazardous zones exasperates the impact of natural disasters. We cannot forget that climate change is an existential threat for us in the Caribbean, and so we must sustain our actions to hold major emitters accountable and push for change that is beneficial to all states, particularly those most affected. The reality in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is as such. My state is one of the more disaster-prone countries in the Eastern Caribbean. During the last decade, various tropical storms, hurricanes, and unseasonal weather conditions have affected St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Indeed, over the last 12 years, there has been an estimated cumulative loss of approximately 1.5 billion EC dollars. The agricultural sector is especially sensitive to extended periods of drought, high temperatures, unevenly distributed rainfall, and natural disasters. The health sector is affected by changing climate and has to manage the burden of climate-sensitive diseases such as vector-borne diseases, just to name a few. The water sector is also subject to negative effects of climate change since the country depends heavily on rainfall to supply its network of rivers and streams for water harvesting. In larger states, a natural disaster or a climate shock can be localized to particular areas. However, in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, any shock is a national one, impacting persons throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The impact of interconnectedness between natural disasters is evident when in SVG between 2010 and 2021, there have been numerous natural disasters that have been considered catalyzed by climate change. These disasters include hurricanes, tropical storms, and flooding. To provide some context, in October of 2010, Hurricane Thomas led to EC $133 million or 10.5% GDP in damage. 28% of the population was affected. Over 1,200 persons were in shelters. Forestry and agriculture were significantly impacted. Fast forward 3 years to December 2013, a trough system which claimed the lives of 12 persons affected 530 homes, 34 of which were destroyed, 118 were damaged, 299 were flooded, and 79 landslides were reported. There is significant damage to bridges and road networks as well. 50% of the population went without water for several days, and schools were disrupted for a week. The northern part of the island was isolated for several days on the north leeward and on the north windward side. The following year, in 2014, another trough system created a direct loss of 300,000 EC dollars from 48 associated landslides. Between 2015 and 2020, there were numerous weather occurrences which caused significant loss and damage and loss of life. 2021 was a record year for my country. We endured volcanic eruptions, a hurricane, and flooding. Notably, we endured 32 explosive eruptions from the La Soufrière volcano. Now, to put that in context, Madam Moderator, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is comprised of 32 islands. So, ironically, there was an explosion for each island that comprises St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Madam Moderator, I have hiked the La Soufrière volcano twice in my lifetime, once as a child and once in adulthood. And the volcano is magnificently beautiful. But during 2021, she was beautifully terrifying. The culmination of this trend in natural disasters and climate change is evidenced in the destruction from Lahaz, and as a consequence of the La Soufrière eruption, damage of $416 million was recorded, with damage to homes and vegetation. 23,000 persons were evacuated from the red and orange zones, and the entire population was affected by the eruption, either through damage suffered to their homes, water shortage, interruptions of power supply, loss of livelihoods, or food insecurity. So that is the reality. Now we go to the second R, which is the re-evaluation. Being cognizant of our reality, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has embarked on a re-evaluation of the climate change crisis by formulating national legislation, policies, and plans which are relevant to climate change. One of which is the National Climate Change Policy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which provides overarching guidance for building resilience and mainstreaming climate change into the national development agenda for low carbon and sustainable growth. It lays out an institutional framework for an integrated and coordinated response that engages all stakeholders for climate change adaptation and mitigation, and seeks to enable harmonization across sectoral policies and plans. One such plan is the National Adaptation Plan, the NAP, which was launched in 2018, and the key strategic framework for achieving the country's adaptation goals. The SVG NAP starts with a 12-year framework from 2018 to 2030 for national and sectoral action. In 2018, my colleague, the Honorable Camilo Gonsalves, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning and Information Technology, noted that adaptation costs are increasing. From 2010 to 2014, extreme weather events have resulted in loss exceeding 35% of our GDP. He also noted that a key step in the right direction is to integrate our NAP into all relevant domestic financing processes, in line with the NAP support program. The NAP was produced through an exhaustive and comprehensive process of review of literature and stakeholders' consultations over the course of 1 year. During that time, multiple workshops were held targeting both technicians and decision makers, in which about 200 representatives from the public and private sectors, civil society, and the media were consulted in order to identify the gaps and needs as a starting point for the development of the plan. This takes us to the final R, resilience. Building resilience in small island developing states has always been a dollars and cents issue. The region's efforts to build resilience has been undermined by the slow progress of the international community to deliver on its outstanding $100 billion per annum commitment to counter climate change. Collective action through regional organizations will therefore increase effectiveness of resilience efforts in certain areas, and the international community should assist in this regard. For example, institutions such as the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, has been instrumental in supporting and supplementing national efforts in countering natural disasters, which have become more frequent and more intense due to climate change throughout the Caribbean. These institutions further help to increase the state's ability to tackle more issues and access additional resources and expertise when required. I welcome the proposal by ECLAC to create a Caribbean Resilience Fund. I believe that the region can benefit tremendously through the fund's target areas. The effects of this climate crisis are quite evident in the Caribbean, and states have long begun ambitious adaptation efforts, which have often led to increased indebtedness. A debt swap initiative can help to reduce states' debt while encouraging investment in adaptation. This initiative, as stated above, should encourage the recognition and the use of a revolutionary multi-vulnerability index as proposed by the CDB president yesterday, who made an excellent presentation on the issue of resilience and recovery. This will help to improve the eligibility of states to access concessional financing and to reduce lending rates. It will indeed require states to develop portfolios of resilience building projects. I believe that whereas not all states may have projects already drafted, they will have information on the various areas needing attention and even project concepts. States with limited capacities may require assistance in transferring their collection of research and knowledge into actionable projects ready for implementation. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has implemented robust policies to ensure food security through investment in green and blue industries. There is a need for more public education in this regard to stimulate interest by the private sector in also moving in that direction. The CELAC plan for food and nutrition security and the eradication of hunger by 2025 is also a key step in the pursuit of food security. Its objective is to contribute to achieving concrete results that translate into significant improvements in the quality of lives of our peoples. Aimed at the eradication of poverty, especially nutrition security, with a view to the eradication of hunger and the enjoyment of the right to food, especially by vulnerable sectors. A cooperative approach to debt for climate change swap is a more viable option for countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, including partnering with ECLAC on its regional initiative. ECLAC is pursuing a program of debt for climate adaptation swaps for the Caribbean through leveraging resources from the Green Climate Fund to write down Caribbean public debt from multilateral and bilateral lenders, and to buy back debt from private creditors at a steep discount. With the newly found fiscal space, Caribbean governments would then make payments into the Caribbean Resilience Fund. The fund is expected to provide financing for investment in climate resilience, growth, and structural transformation in the economies of the region. So to address the Caribbean's vulnerability, we suggest that there needs to be one, an enabling environment to facilitate the mainstreaming of climate change adaptation in the planning, budgeting, and implementation processes by strengthening the governance structures to enhance synergies between adaptation and disaster risk reduction, including the identification, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation and communication of adaptation actions. 2, we must improve the capacity for data and information collection, management and sharing determination of climatic risk, and access to technology and financing for adaptation. 3, we must implement for adaptation actions towards an increased resilience of the most vulnerable members of the population. Madam Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, having heard about the challenges and the various efforts towards stronger resilience, I urge all diplomatic partners present here and those who are present virtually to continue to advocate for small island developing states. I implore you to advocate for our nationals, advocate for our development, and most importantly, advocate for our survival. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We have just been treated to a presentation of the textbook case of the challenges that small island states of the Caribbean face, of the costs and the impact on the governments and the economies, and the kind of strategies that are being valiantly implemented through national climate policy and strategies for mainstreaming resilience and climate, and at the same time recognizing that there is insufficient financing to invest in resilience. This is a real challenge. You've got all of it in this presentation. I allowed you to go on, Minister, because I thought that it was important for the meeting to hear this example of the challenge that small island states face. Thank you very much for that presentation.